page 51. Okay, so we're discussing the difference between mamale and sovev. And we're saying that mamale reveals itself in each world in accordance with the vessels of that world. Whereas there's a different light, sovev, which shines equally in all the worlds. Right? Meaning to say that it actually doesn't shine in a revealed way in all the worlds, not revealed to any of the worlds themselves. Because that's the whole point, is that it's a light which does not recognize worlds. It's beyond the world, so it means it doesn't fit into any vessels of the world. It's not sort of tailor-made to fit and to be contracted into the parameters of the world. It doesn't have that boundary on it. So it doesn't mean it doesn't shine in them. It means that their boundaries cannot pick up on it.
It's like physics and Judaism.
Basically. Yeah, in a very serious way it is, because there's all kinds of things that are sort of sovev to us. For example, there's frequencies that other animals can hear that we can't hear, and there's levels of light and so forth that other things can see that we can't see. There's a whole experience that's taking place which is just out of the grasp of the kelim, and there's certain things that even if you might be in Etzilus, where your kelim are unbelievable and expansive and you can see everything, there's still light, which is by definition light, which is not ever made to fit into any vessels, to be perceived by any kli, which is shining no matter how high you are. And that therefore is as ungraspable in the highest worlds as it is in the lowest worlds. And that's called sovev, means surrounding. Again, we said it doesn't mean that it's not in, it just means it's surrounding the perception of the creatures, but not that it's not permeating them, because it is permeating everything. And the whole point is that through his skafi and his hapcha, right? That's the line that we're going from. Kadi skafi sitra achra, istalak ikar dekutra bricha makula omen. This is the line I told everyone to memorize. When you have iskafia, you reveal the glory of Hashem in, quote, all the worlds. And then we got through saying that it doesn't mean that you're going to reveal the glory of Hashem in each and every world according to its parameters. It doesn't mean in each and every world. It means the light which is called in all the worlds equally, which is a sovev light. So when you have iskafia, you draw forth the sovev light. So in other words, you usher in, to a certain degree, into not necessarily even to a state of perception, but into a state of making room for the sovev light, so that it becomes present in the worlds when you have iskafia. We talked about it yesterday. How, like an analogy for that would be the will, right? So when you iskafia on your nefesh bahamis, so you make room for the will of the godly soul. So not necessarily that you see a difference per se in the body because the will is now there. It's just that the will is having its day in the sun, as it were, to enable its interests to come out and be seen, the interest of the nefesh elokis. So the same thing is true, like the cosmic will, the sovev level of light, which is God's interests. You don't see God when you see his interests. You still see the human body doing its different things. But when it's doing certain things, with having his skafia and his hapcha, so it's enabling the presence of the divine will to act in the world. Otherwise, it's not. It does not become feeling light. It's just that the feeling light is what you see, what you're doing. Right? So you're having actions. You never see the will. Just like in a person, you never see his will. Even you could see, wow, that person has a lot of willpower going on, but you see that only by observing the revealed powers. The will always maintains itself to be a concealed power which is never seen. It's just that you can see its effect. When the revealed powers are doing something, they're obeying the will. So you can see what the will is up to, but you can't actually see it. Right? Much like you can't see a person's soul, for example. Right? Even though all I can ever see is your body. Even though, yes, your body is animated, and sometimes I see your body is happy, and sometimes it's jumping, and sometimes it's singing, but and I see that all that is coming and being produced from your soul, but I never see your soul. It's the underlying power which picks up the body, but at the end of the day, all the body can ever perceive is what's revealed before it, which is the mamali kol omi. But it's almost perceptible, the soul. right? It's as though I can see your soul. And there's proofs for the soul. For example, when the person's sleeping, or chas v'shalom, when a person's not alive anymore, you see that there's a major difference between when he was alive and when he wasn't alive. So it's as though you can see the soul, the life force, but you can't. You can only ever see the body. So the same thing is true as the will. Right? You can't ever see it. You can only see its accomplishments. And so this is the idea. When you have iskafia and ishapcha, so that means you're controlling or transforming your goof to do something else. So you reveal this light of the soviv, this unseen light. It actually becomes, which of God, it becomes present, so to speak, and it gets revealed because it's having its way and it's coming out in a certain sense through the body. It's not ever becomes like mamali, because again, mamali is something that you can see, touch, feel. But just like you reveal your soul. You know, when a person wakes up, so his soul is now in his body. Does that mean I can see his soul any more than I could see it when he was sleeping? Can never see the soul. It's a spiritual thing. But I see the soul's functioning. I see the soul is at work. You see what I mean? When he wakes up. So I don't actually see the soul. I only see the body. But I can see the effects of the soul very clearly. The difference between when he's sleeping and when he's awake. So it's not as though it becomes revealed that now I can see his soul. It's just that I can see that it's in a certain sense been revealed to me because its function and its power is being manifest through the mamali. The mamali is the only thing that you ever actually see. Yeah.
Is this so that light identical to the light that Hashem withdrew in the beginning?
Yeah. Ultimately, the real sovev is the light that's withdrawn, which cannot be perceived by the creations. I say the real sovev because there's different levels of sovev, but yes, that is the original. Okay. You with me? Yeah? Okay. Where do we leave off? I think we're going to go with the line starts Bakulhu Olmi. See, that's already for that. It says there. It says Our Meir B'chol Olmos B'Shabes. So this sovev light shines in all the worlds equally. V'zehu, and this is an important place. Bakulhu Olmi. Going back to our original quote, Kadiskafi Sitra Achra, Stalik Yikar Dekujabrichu Bakulhu Olmi. Right? Memorize that. So it means that when you have Hiskafia, you reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds. And now we know what it means, all the worlds. Not that it gets in each and every world, but that light which is equal in all the worlds, which is a sovev light, gets revealed when you have Hiskafia. Which means that this light, the way that it's drawn down, is that it gets drawn down in all the worlds equally. You notice when you reveal the will of the godly soul, for example, in our analogy, then it's automatically, once you put, like we just had in Tanya yesterday, there's two kings fighting for the body, right? For the small city. So once the will of the godly soul, that certain king takes charge, he's revealed equally entire body suddenly all at once. Like he's running the show from head to foot. So when that aspect of the will comes to be revealed, it's automatically revealed in every arena of the body, from head, atzilus, down to asiya, to the foot, because you've replaced the underlying generator of light, which is this will, with the proper will, with the godly soul's will, and that's what it means. Ofen hamshachasa, the way it's drawn down, is that it's automatically in all the worlds equally, because the will like sort of consumes the whole organism. You following that? But in order to draw this light out, in all the worlds, so this is what we said all along, that this is the avoda of man, the refinement process. This is basically the two forms of avoda. And that's what it means when you will subdue the sitra achra, kasher poel ba'avodaso. when you affect with your service liyosi skafia sitra achra, to subdue the sitra achra, the other side, which is trying to come in and make you do what it wants, and you subdue it. V'ishabcha chashuch l'nahora, and more than that, you transform darkness to light. You take something which is presently in the realm of darkness and you turn it around into light. Which basically, in a simple sense, you could say this is the idea of a negative mitzvah and a positive mitzvah. A negative mitzvah is don't do this. You sort of subdue something, right? You don't give in to forces that are trying to get you to do the wrong thing. And a positive mitzvah is you take something which is anyway in klippa, right? And you transform it to be no longer in klippa but in kedusha. You take a fruit, an esrog, which is just growing on a tree, basically klippas noga, and you put it inside of a mitzvah. You transform it from dark to light, basically. In a simple sense, I mean, there's different levels of these avodas, but in the simplest sense, everyone is shayach to the inyan of ishapcha, to transformation, because every time you do something with the world and you turn it into a godly thing, you transform it from worldliness to godliness. So these two forms of service, hine yisur ha'or hu me'achoshech dafka. Hainu, so he says the advantage of light is specifically from the dark. Hainu, what does that mean? The kasher ha'choshech na'afach la'or, which means when is light truly the most precious is when the darkness itself turns into light. Meaning what? So in other words, if you have a dark room and then you shine a light into it, then you could say, in a simple sense, the advantage of light, there's an advantage of light over darkness. Now you can see, right? So light is better than dark. But that's, as the Rebbe often says, you don't need the wisest man in the world to tell you this. Shlomo HaMelech taught us this. There's an advantage of dark over light. What does he mean? So he says, the Yisur Na'or Hu Min HaChoshech Dafka, that it's when, why is that, that's not sufficient? Because the truth is, even though you've brought the light into the room, you've not really gotten rid of the darkness. And the proof is, as soon as you take the light out of the room, the darkness is still there. You've just basically put something shiny in the place of darkness, so the darkness cannot be seen anymore. That's the idea. But if you take the light out, the darkness comes back. It's a proof that you haven't actually removed the darkness. You've just replaced it temporarily with something which shines brighter than it. But the idea of the advantage of light is from the darkness, dafka, is when if you would be able somehow to take darkness and make it into light, so that there is no more opponent. This is like similar to what we said in the other mimers about the difference between Moshe's conquest of the Midbar, right, versus Shlomo's conquest of the world, and even further will be in the Mashiach's times. Remember this? We said even though Moshe went in with the Aaron and went around vayafutzu oivecha and he scattered the enemies, there's still an enemy. They're just in a state of scattered. He hasn't uprooted the enemy. He just sort of subdued them to a certain degree, but they're still there. The ultimate victory is when the enemies themselves become friends. Pada b'shalom nafshi, like the whole thing we learned. Then you don't have any more enemies, there's no more fighting. So the same thing is true regarding the Iker Inyan of what the advantage of light from darkness. Of course there's an advantage of light over darkness. But the real chiddush is that there's an advantage of light which is made out of darkness. When you make darkness into light, that's the ultimate advantage of light, because now you have no darkness whatsoever. And that's called hishapcha. That's transformation. When you get to a state of transformation, there's no more need for subjugation because there's no more enemy. That's called hishapcha chashuch l'nehora, that you transform the actual darkness into light. And we do that when we make a mitzvah. Because the world, which is basically in a state of darkness, it's klippa, and it's concealing God, you take it and you make it reveal God. So you turn the thing itself from dark to light. That's when the darkness itself becomes light. So it becomes, then you get the real advantage of light. That the light shines in a revealed way, to the point that it shines all the way down below into the darkness. What does it mean? Because if you just scatter your enemy, so the darkness is still looming somewhere. The proof is, when you bring light into a room, there's still darkness in that room. You just can't see it. So you have not really made a dira b'tachtonim. You've made it so that the tachtonim can no longer be seen. But the darkness is still sitting there. The only way to really make a dwelling place in the lowest world is to make the lowest world shine. not just to subdue them, as it were. And therefore, this is what he's saying here, that the real advantage of light is when the or is made begiloy ad asher yer lamata mamish. And it's revealed until it reveals dafke in the lowest place itself. That the darkness itself is now shining. And how do you do that? You draw down the light in such a way asher ofen hamshachaso hu bechol ha'olmos b'shaveh. So therefore, you have to access a different kind of light. If by definition, this is a very important point, if by definition there's differences between the worlds and the vessels of each world, and some vessels can handle a lot of light, and some vessels can handle a little light, and some vessels by definition block light. So then you're never going to be able to bring into those vessels which block light by their very nature, light. Because they're made in such a way that light does not shine in them. That's called the tachtonim. You cannot, by normal order of the Seder Ishtalshlus, bring light and trickle it down into them, because their job is to be vessels which block light. They're Helam v'Hester. So how do you get them to shine? So you have to elicit a different kind of light, which shines equally in all the world, that no darkness can keep this light out. And that is the Sovev light, which cannot be kept out even if your vessels block it entirely, because it does not consider, as we've been saying, the limitations of the vessels at all. It shines into the vessels if they're big, if they're small, same thing, because it's not tailor-made to go into any vessels, therefore it can't be limited. That's exactly right.
The difference between so with Makif, where it could temporarily subdue the darkness, whereas like previous light would then ultimately transform it, so even when it's away from Shomo No,
Right.
Mashiach, he would still be transformed.
Right, and that's ultimately by reaching a higher light, which is beyond the Seder Ishtalshlus. Remember we said over there that we went successively up in realms of Kesser, right? It's very, very much tapped in. Like what we were talking about over there is mamish, because here in the later parts of this memory is also going to get into these three levels of Kesser. Very much the same thing. And the idea is basically only when you get to this top level of Kesser, when worlds don't take any place at all, there's no such thing as a world, Bichlal. Remember we said Atik, even Atik, it's called Atik because it's separated from the world. So even though it's separate from the world, it's still associated. We said it's almost like a separation of like a marriage, chas v'shalom. That even though you're in a state of separation, so I want nothing to do with this person, but you're called separated, which means you still have like a relationship. Your relationship is separated. But then we said there's the Indian of Reisha de lo Yisyada. There's like an unknowable head. It's not even in a relationship whatsoever. So it's completely beyond anything having to do with any limitations of worlds. When that light gets revealed, then it's not shaykh to the order of the world whatsoever, and therefore it really is found in the lowest worlds and the highest worlds equally. Because anything which is in somewhat relationship with worlds, it has to, it's moded, like size itself up basically with the limitations of the worlds, and therefore it's always going to treat higher worlds somewhat different than it treats lower worlds, and therefore there's always going to be a place where the darkness has some achiza, some holding. When you get to a point where there's absolutely no difference between high and low, you go to a place which worlds do not exist, so then it shines just as equally in the lower worlds.
We said that was the light of Mashiach, right? Which Rav Shimon Bar Yochai accessed.
Yeah.
Kaddish to Moshe and Shlomo.
Right. V'zeu kad iskafi sitra achra istalik tikar dekocha brichu b'kulam. Now you see I have to memorize it. It says 5 or 6 times already. And this is what he says: when you will subdue the Sitra Achra, you will reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds. Bechinas ha'or, which means a level of light, shenimshach or hasovev, kol almi, which means you draw forth when you have iskafia, the level of sovev kol almi. She'ofen hamshachaso bechinas sovev umakiv bekol ha'olmes b'shaveh, which means that the way that it comes into the worlds, it doesn't trickle down through the Seder Ishtalshlus, distributing light in appropriate vessels and therefore leaving the bottom dark. But when it comes in boom, it comes in everywhere all at once. Its way of being drawn down is in a way of Sovev and Makif, B'kola Olmas B'shaveh, all the worlds equally. It's suddenly found everywhere equally all at once.
What's the source of the light? Is that what we said? Rish de Loyada. This is
Well, there's different levels of Kesser. But the ultimate level of the Kesser is this Rish Lo Yada. Panemius Atik. I mean, basically, what he's saying is that we can, and more or less, more than you think. In other words, it's our job to draw that down, right? That's what we were created to work with these lights. And how do you do it? It's crazy. We have access to it at every moment. Skafia, right? It means you just don't do something. It draws down this level of light. I mean, it draws down this Sovev Kolom, he's saying. It draws down, and what we're saying in simple terminology, without making it all complicated Kabbalistically, Hashem's will. The whole notion of Kesser is that it's the will of God. Kesser in general is the will. So when you conform yourself to the will of God, without getting all mystical, right? Even like a Hasidically challenged brothers can understand that when you are performing a mitzvah, the will of God is acting through you. Well, now we put it in the language of Hasidus. The will of God is the Kesser of Atzilus. So that means you are driving your body with Kesser of Atzilus, which means you're drawing Kesser into this world. Different levels of the Kesser, and so forth. But yeah. Yeah, do you have a question, Dave? No. You don't have a book. Here, you guys will look on together. You're going to make copies, maybe, you said, yeah?
Office isn't a power.
Wow. Okay. V'im kei meir gam lamata. So if it shines equally in all the worlds, it also shines lamata, kamoshu lamayla. It shines equally below as it does above. Follow? V'zeu v'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. And that's what it means. Make for me a mikdash, and I will dwell within you. B'soch kol echad ve'echad. There you go, Moshe. In every single one of you. And you make for me a mikdash. It's a commandment to you. Make for me a dwelling place. In other words, here you are in the lowest world. Well, make it a dwelling place for God. In other words, how do you make the lowest world a dwelling place for God? Only one way. Sovev kolamim light. Because if you try and do it with mamali light, you're never going to be able to make it a true dwelling place for God, because it's by definition dark down here. But but there's a commandment. Asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. Make yourself a mikdash, and then I will dwell within you. Al yidei avoda de bechinas iskafi v'izhabcha. And that's how, essentially, having hiskafi and izhabcha chashuch l'nahora, and transforming darkness into light. Hine nasa al yidei zeh yisro na'or. So by doing this, you create this true advantage of light. In other words, which is not just light in place of darkness, which, let me just explain this once again. Yisro na'or min ha'choshech, in the simple terms, means that Atzilus is higher than Bria and higher than Asiyah. So advantage, light is obviously better than dark. Obviously, we don't need Shlomo HaMelech to tell us that. But the Yisro na'or min ha'choshech is that, but the advantage of light that's produced from the darkness, when the darkness itself shines, that's talking about a different order of light. That's talking about Soviv Kolom. So there's two ways of looking at it. The regular concept that there's an advantage of light over darkness, which Shlomo HaMelech talks about, you could look at that that's a mamali light, which means that the top is higher than the bottom. There's an advantage of the top over the bottom. But when you talk, the deeper meaning is that there's an advantage when you transform darkness itself can no longer be dark. It transforms itself into light. So that's already talking about a different level of light. That's the Soviv light. That's the true advantage of light over darkness, because you've completely eliminated the notion of darkness at that point. It's not just a relative thing that light is higher, right? It's that you've gone to a new sug, a new breed of light, where you can only reach it by transforming the darkness into light, and then you get to the true advantage of light, where darkness is not even materialized anymore. And in doing so, again, you reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds, which means that it shines the Or Soviv. Kitzer, Iker Shechina B'Tachtonim. So in short, the main Shechina was in the lowest worlds. In other words, it began this way, that the lowest worlds had the light of Soviv in them, and it's supposed to return. Yivar the Kavanas Brias Olamos, sheyeh dira b'tachtonim, and we explained that the whole purpose of the creation of the worlds is that ultimately there would be a dira b'tachtonim. Ultimately, that in the lowest worlds, this light would shine. There's supposed to be a influx of Or Sovev in the created worlds of Or Mamali. That's the purpose of creation. But Naisa al yedei Hiskafi Yizhabcha, and it takes place through the avoda of Hiskafi Yizhabcha, Shamam Sheichor HaSovev, which draws down that light. Shezeu b'kulu almi b'shabbat. And that's the meaning of all the worlds. That this light, you reveal the light of all the worlds, i.e., the light that's equal in all the worlds. Okay. Base. V'hinei zos haisa avoda b'mishkan u'mikdash, and this was the avoda that took place in the Mishkan and the Mikdash. Ba'avodas habiruri, which was the avoda of transformation, of refinement, the bechinas iskafia, of the level of iskafia, hamevi u'mayla lebechinas izhabcha chashuch lanora, which iskafia, which brings and elevates you ultimately to the level of izhabcha. In other words, you start with iskafia, and it brings you and elevates you ultimately to the level of transforming darkness to light. First, you start by subduing the darkness. And this is what he's going to say was what happened in the service of the Beis HaMikdash. What was the service of the Beis HaMikdash? What was the service of the Beis HaMikdash? Karbanos, right? So here he's telling us that this is the primary service of man, and the commandment of make me a mikdash and I'll dwell within you is not talking about a mikdash, it's talking about me. And it's talking about me doing the service of Hiskafi and Hishapcha. I get that. But then what does it say? It says, make me a mikdash. Which means that obviously the work in the mikdash was a model of this concept of what it means for us to have Hiskafi and Hishapcha. So the whole avodah of the mitzvah mikdash, which is karbanos, we're going to see, is the primary service of Hiskafi and Hishapcha. That's what they did in the mikdash. You follow that?
Yeah, can you explain that a little further?
Meaning to say... Well, here, I'll read one more line and then I'll explain a little bit further. He says, therefore, one of the avodas of the mikdash was the Indian of karbanos, right? Which is a spiritual service of the soul. Okay, so what was it? The base of it was a slaughterhouse. If you looked there, that's what it would look like, right? Just people cutting up meat, cooking meat, blood, bones, everything. That's what was going on over there, 24/7, right? But what was going on there? That's all it was. It was just like a slaughterhouse. So the thing is that this whole thing was a spiritual service they were performing, and we're going to get into it soon in very great detail. But the idea is that this notion of what was make me a mikdash, which is literally the physical mikdash, is supposed to be a parallel to us making ourselves a mikdash, which means Hashem can dwell in us. And how do we say Hashem dwells in us? By these two levels of service, Hiskafi and Hishapcha, right? Which means transforming ourselves, or subduing ourselves and transforming ourselves. So that's exactly what was going on in the actual Mikdash. There was a subduing of self and transforming of the self. And we're going to see that it took place with the karbanos, with the actual animal sacrifice, which was a model of Hiskafi and Hishapcha. So Hashem was showing us what he means, basically. The whole thing was a spiritual thing that we're supposed to learn how to act every moment of our lives from what was the perpetual service of the real Mikdash, which is really a symbol for us. I mean, it's not merely a symbol. Doing that work actually made the Or Sovev light come down. It wasn't just a symbol. But even in its absence, it showed us symbolically how we can continue to make the Sovev light come down by basically being a little base of Mikdash. What's the base of Mikdash? Doing the service of Karbanos 24/7. Which is the service of Hiskafi and Hishapcha, as we're going to see.
It's like mockery of ourselves.
That's right. V'zeu inyan hishtatfus hakonim v'alevim b'avodasa. If it was just the slaughterhouse, then you would not have the participation of the Kohanim and the Levim in the service. V'shiram v'zimram be'eis havas hakarm. They were singing and praising God in the middle of cutting up this meat and burning the flesh there. So obviously it wasn't just a physical action. There was a whole spiritual, meaningful thing taking place there. Hishtatfus, partnership.
Zimra is singing and dancing.
No, Zimra is also another form of singing.
Music.
Yeah, exactly, music, yeah. Klezmer, klezmer, Zimra.
I think there's blood spilling all over the place.
That- That's where Hashem loves to dwell.
Blood?
In the blood of
In
sacrifice.
slaughterhouse?
That's right. A spiritual slaughterhouse. We're going to see. Shezeu avoda ruchnis. This is a spiritual avoda. What is this singing and music doing in the slaughterhouse, right? It's not just a regular place there.
Not singing songs. Like, what are you doing?
Okay, so this is the classics, you guys. It doesn't get any more classic than this. This is what is the avoda of the carbon in the soul, right? What does it mean that you're going to bring a carbon? The ksiv. Okay, so this is the verse which tells us about bringing karbanos in the base of mikdash, and it says Adam ki yakriv mikem carbon lahavaya. It says like this: a man ki yakriv mikem, when you will offer from amongst yourselves a carbon lahavaya, a sacrifice to God, mina bahema, mina bakar, mina tzon. You will bring it from the animal, from the cattle, and from the sheep. The lechora, and this is a diuk from the Alter Rebbe's mimer called Adam ki yakriv, and he says lechora yuksha. There's a question here. The im haisa kavanasu bezeh. If the intention behind this verse was rak levar mishpati akarbin, was just to explain the laws of a carbon, which is what it seems to be doing, havi le'lameima, then it should have said Adam mikem ki yakriv carbon laHashem. What's the difference? Go ahead.
That just makes more than that sense.
Will bring from you.
No, instead of a man will bring a carbon from amongst you. Okay, so let me just clarify that. It makes, you see the difference, Bichlav? There's one difference. The word mikem is moved in the sentence. In the way it's written in the verse, it says Adam ki yakriv mikem. And he's saying if it was just merely coming to tell you laws of the sacrifice, then it's grammatically more appropriate to say Adam mikem ki yakriv. Because what does it mean? It means a man from amongst you when he offers. That's what you should say. Why would you say a man when he offers from amongst you? It's just like misplaced. You wouldn't say it even in English like that. You would say someone from amongst you when he offers a sacrifice, blah blah. Right? Hine kach v'kach. Right? Blah blah is actually in the mind. Right? Hine kach v'kach. It would be such and such. Right? Kach v'kach yeh mishpat havas carbon. Such and such would be the law of bringing the carbon. V'lichaso v'halichasav. And its laws. Period. That's what it should have said if it was just trying to tell you that. So why does it say in this strange order when a man will offer from amongst you? It's known the kavanah in this, the Alter Rebbe taught us. Is because it comes to explain to us the general concept of karbanos in service in our own soul of a man. V'zeu Adam ki yakriv, and that's what it means. A man ki yakriv, a man he will offer. What does it mean? Ha'adam kasher yiskarev lelokus. The word yakriv, carbon, comes from the word karov, which means to come close to God. Simple as that. Who said it has to be like a literal the way you look at it? The word yakriv, carbon, you could just as easily say that it means come close to God. That's what it means. The word means to come close. Carbon. So what does it mean, a sacrifice, so to speak? The word sacrifice literally means to come close to godliness. Ha'adam kasher yiskarev lelokus. So the beginning of the verse says clearly, Adam ki yakriv. It's not talking about animals at all. It's talking about a man when he wants to come close to God. Hine mikem hu carbon lahavaya. So then it tells you how to do it. Mikem, from you, has to be the carbon to Hashem. Mikem ubachem toloi hadavar. From you and within you, the matter depends. Lios carbon Hashem. If you want to come close to God, it has to come from you. Hainu lios karov elavaya, which means you have to come close to God. Okay, so what are we saying? This is a major chiddush. So go back to the original verse. What is it saying? It's not talking about carbonos and animals anymore. It's talking about something completely different than that. Which is that we're learning the service of God in a human being from the verse which describes the karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash, but they're totally two different concepts. And that's what we were saying before, that we learn how to have iskafi nithabcha, which is has nothing to do with offering animals. We learn that from the service of the mikdash, which has everything to do with offering animals, because that's what it says. Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. We are called a mikdash. Doesn't mean our mikdash looks like that mikdash. It's a spiritual parallel, and it says Adam ki